There are two major differences between the clarinet and the saxophone. One is acoustic, and that is that the saxophone is a cone. The clarinet, if you could look up the bore, is a cylinder. In other words, it's even all up and down. It doesn't slope. Saxophone, we're small here and we gradually open up until we're big at the bell. It's a cone, it's conical. This is cylindrical. That makes a big difference in acoustics because the saxophone will play every overtone. It'll overblow octaves. It'll blow over an octave, then a fifth, then another octave, then it spells a dominant seventh chord, then it goes into a scale. The whole Overtone series is possible on the saxophone. On the clarinet, it is not. You can only play the first, third, fifth, seventh partials, and so on. In other words, if I play a low note, and I hit the octave key, that's not an octave higher. That's an octave plus a fifth because we skipped the octave in the Overtone series. If I force it into the next mode of vibration, again, it will not go up to the second octave. It'll skip again and go to the third above that. When the notes that we could get on the saxophone would be more like this. I'm actually fingering them because I can't do that on the clarinet. I'm skipping those in between notes. That changes the whole thing about the fingering system, and it means that the low octave, if I finger all the fingers down, this is not a C like it would be on the saxophone. This is an F. F, G, A, B flat, C, F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. Whereas if I just put the octave key on, same fingerings, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So we actually have the F fingering set and the C fingering set on the same instrument. Now historically there are those two sets. For example, if you take a more ancient instrument like the recorder, it's a non-transposing instrument. And so if you're doing a tenor recorder or a soprano recorder, you're using C fingerings. But if you're playing bass recorder or alto recorder or soprano recorder, you're using F fingerings, F set fingerings. Those fingerings look like the low register of the clarinet, whereas the other fingerings look like the upper register of the clarinet or the saxophone or the flute, so on. The bassoon uses F set fingerings, so I have to be able to use those. All the fingers on the bassoon are like the low register. This is going to be an F, G, A, B natural, C, G, C, D, E, F. So we have these two different finger systems, and therefore it's kind of an advantage to get you familiar with both of those systems on the clarinet, because it's going to help us. The upper register helps us on the flute and the clarinet and the flute. Yeah, it is clarinet, but the upper register of the clarinet helps us on the flute and the saxophone and the oboe. The lower register helps on the bassoon, and then also on those bass, alto, and soprano recorders. So it's handy. The other major difference comes in tone production. There are so many things that are the same, like tonguing is going to be exactly the same, and so on. But the fingerings, the tone production is different. Why is it different? How is it different? If you take the clarinet and think about the length of the clarinet versus the length of the alto saxophone, let's say, about the same, right? No. That's because the saxophone's all bent. What if we straightened out the bell, straightened out the neck? It's now quite a bit longer than the clarinet. It's going to play lower than the clarinet, and the clarinet will play quite a bit higher than the saxophone then. Now because of that, I have to make the reed vibrate quite a bit faster on the clarinet than I do on the saxophone. And the differences in the embouchure, for example, have a lot to do with getting the reed to vibrate faster. So I need to have a thin lip here. Can you imagine if I have a thin lip against the reed, it's going to vibrate faster than if I have a thick, fat lip against the reed. I'm going to slow it down. So I've got to have a thin lip. That means I'm going to pull into to the sides. Gives me a stretch here. The problem is I have to close around the mouthpiece, and so I have to create a tug of war of E-U that will bring, it compromises the E a little bit because it has to come into a tug of war to be able to close around the mouthpiece. So it's the E-U tug of war, the smile muscles versus the pucker muscles. And neither side wins on the clarinet. If either side wins, you lose. On the saxophone, the oo wins. The whole thrust is the roundness. We talked about this a little bit in an earlier chapter. This is mostly review right now. But I do want to show a few more things that'll be new. And I would refer you back to the basics chapter. There's a lot in the basics chapter that will help to differentiate sax and clarinet. So I've got to set up my embouchure this way, but there's another stretch. I've got the EU stretch, but I also stretch with the reed trying to push the lip vertically into the mouth, and this flat chin saying, no, I'm resisting that, we're not going there. Now I've got the lip being pulled this way, and I've got the lip being stretched this way as well. So I keep the reed wiped off. We don't want it to be slippery. You got to have some traction there. The reed engages the lip, and then it tries to push it in. But I'm pulling then with the chin, so it's not letting. If I let it, I'm going to let that lip go right in. But we resist that, and we end up with this very thin, tight piece of lip right here against the reed. That's critical on the clarinet because it really speeds the reed up. If I don't do that, then I have this kind of a sound. Should be this. We want that clear, really focused sound that has a ring in it. If I'm playing this way, sounds very spread because the reed is vibrating considerably too slow. I don't have this thin lip that I need. On the saxophone, this is an advantage to have a little bit of a fat lip because it slows the reed down, and we need to get it to vibrate a little bit slower. We don't actually want to do this on the saxophone, not even on the soprano. So it's that stretch going that way and this way. If you can get that, then you can get that ring in the tone. It's really easy to hear low, but it's the same high. That's going to give me the clear resonant sound. If I play like this up high, so we're after that more focused, clear sound that's got that more ring in it and not this more open spread sound. That's the first big thing. If I'm working with a student who's been playing saxophone and wants to learn to play the clarinet, we got to get into that concept of how to produce the embouchure, to get that fast reed, to get that ring in the tone, always clear and focused up at the top. Focus at the top is another important thing I should address, because you remember on the saxophone, we talked about mouthpiece pitches. I went started a little too high. Again, where should I stabilize? Should I be playing the clarinet like that? No. No, not even that. There. At the very top. Now on the saxophone, I don't want to be at the top. I want to be down into the middle of the pitch. On the clarinet, I'm at the top. I kind of think about it this way. On the saxophone, I'm up here, the note's down here. When I blow down into the note. On the clarinet, I'm down here, the note's up here. It's like the air is going right up across the roof of my mouth and into the mouthpiece. And there is a certain amount of voicing, of course, with the tongue and the oral cavity here to get that feel. And I guess that demonstration should help you realize that I'm going to use a cold airstream. Saxophone, a little warmer. Clarinet, cold airstream, fast, small amount of air moving very fast. So those are critical concepts for the clarinet to get the right tone production happening. And it usually takes quite a bit to make a believer out of a student. that it really takes that much to play that. So that's kind of the thing on tone. Now on the problems that are caused by having the multiple fingering systems, here's the problem. If I play the low register on the saxophone, when I get to here, I'm ready to start over. But guess what? It doesn't work on the clarinet that way. On the saxophone, I get to C sharp, I just start over and I got D. That's the break. When we get to the shortest piece of tubing, and then we go to the longest piece of tubing, we're talking about the break. To be able to go any higher than the shortest piece, we have to start over with long and overblow into the overtones. On the saxophone, when we get to the C sharp, we can just start over with a D, put on the octave key, we're ready to go again. That isn't how it is on the clarinet because of that problem that I overblow a 12th. So if I'm playing this note, I'm going from low E to B. Well, if I start over, when I get to here, it's going to take me to there. Or if I start over from the F, gives me a C. So now I get up to the open. And then there's that gap there, that distance that I haven't been able to cover yet. This is what causes all the problems. Now those notes in that little area between where the top is and where I start over, those are the notes on the clarinet that are called the throat tones. And it's those throat tones, and I'm going to call that from F sharp, G, A sharp, A flat, G sharp, A, B flat. Those are those notes right in there. Because when I get to here, I got to get those notes in there before I can start over. Now I'm starting over right there. And it's that causes the trouble. So we have some techniques that are required here, and these are written out in the book. But I've got to be able to play the F sharp to A roll. I think I'm going to move this back a little bit so you got more of a picture of what I'm doing. Hopefully, let's bring it down a little bit too. All right, now you can see my first finger. I have to be able to have my first finger roll from the first finger hole to the A spatula above. So that's the first thing I have students do, is learn to play the F sharp to A roll. We're isolating one of the more difficult coordinations. It gets even a little bit more difficult when I isolate from E to B flat. Now the first finger is still doing the same thing. But on the back, let me see if I can illustrate this. The thumb is going from the thumb hole to the octave key. The thumb is rocking like this. I'll give you some different angles so you can hopefully see it. Now to play the E, B flat, I've got to have both. My first finger is rolling, my thumb's rocking. I got a real rock and roll affair going on here. It's a difficult coordination. That's got to be intact to be able to play over the break properly. So the first step in over the break on the clarinet are the rolls. Roll the F sharp to the A, index finger, add the thumb and roll the E to the B flat. Thumb is rocking. Second phase of over the break, what I call the loops. And the loops are going to do a beautiful thing here because they're going to let me descend over the break first. So here's how it goes. By the way, it's pretty challenging to cover holes. On the saxophone, we're just hitting pads. We don't have to worry about whether the hole gets covered. Here, you've actually got to cover the holes. So I think it's helpful before trying to go down to actually play to the bottom and make sure all your fingers are intact before you do this. I go to the low F, hit the octave key. Really, technically on the clarinet, it's not called an octave key, it's called a register key, because we're taking us to the other register, but it's not up an octave. So there's my F up to C. Now I'm above the break. I'm continuing to descend, so my next note down is what? B flat. This is where the E, B flat roll is going to happen in actual context. There it is. Continue down until I hit the F and I've made a full loop. I can do this many times in a row. That's why I call it a loop. That's the F major loop. And what it's doing is putting in the E, B flat roll into context. The other loop I like to use is the C loop. So I'm going to start on the 3-fingered C in the low, and then I'm going to go down with the B natural, down to low E, both little fingers. Then I'm going to pop the octave key and I'm going to be on a B. Now I'm above the break. I'm continuing to descend, so my next note down is A, and this is where the F sharp A roll lives in actual context. There's my loop. And I can do that many times in a row, and I'm getting that F sharp to A roll really in the context. So I've got two loops, my F major loop and my C major loop. The advantage of those is, first of all, I've got all the holes covered before I try to go over the break. Then I can just pop the octave key, I'm up there, no problem, and then I can descend over the break, and that's going to give me a chance to apply those rolls, and I'm going to get the technique going for the over the break stuff. Now in phase 3, we have to ascend over the break. This is really the most challenging thing we have to do. There are two problems with this. Let's say that I'm ascending on that C loop. I'm not doing the loop, I'm just ascending on the C major scale. I'm on the A, but instead of rolling to the A, I'm coming from open G. So I'm nowhere, and I got to come out of nowhere with how I put my finger on that key. Well, in a second, I'm going to have to roll it. So if I don't put it there in a reasonable position, I'm not going to be able to roll to that hole to go over the break. So I've got to put this finger on that key as if I had rolled there, because I'm going to roll down in just a moment. How do I know how to put it there as if I'd rolled there if I haven't rolled there a bunch of times? And that's where I think the rolls and the loops are super helpful. Now I've got a feeling for what it feels like when I roll there. Now from open G, I try to put my finger there as if I'd rolled there. I could roll away from it. Now, the other problem I have is now I'm on A. I got all those fingers to put down all at once. I got to cover all those holes. That's a challenge, and it's easy to miss a little bit on a hole and squeak and so on. Here's what we do about that. When I get to the A, there's no appreciable difference if I put the bottom hand down. And so we actually do prepare the bottom hand before we go over the break. And this is a real thing. This is what pros do. This is not a remedial technique. This is what I do. So the bottom hand's connected to the A key. So right here's where the battle's won. The fingers there, my index finger's there as if I rolled, and my bottom hand's already in place. Now when I go over a break, I just have to do the roll back and pop the top hand down. Much simpler. Otherwise, that's a nightmare to get from the A to the B. So those are the two techniques for ascending. Put either your first finger or your thumb or both, well, it's either your first finger or your thumb and your first finger for a B flat, and then prepare your bottom hand, and then go with the rolls. Now, realize that if I don't have an A in the scale, maybe I'm playing now a scale of, say it's E flat, I have an A flat and a B flat, but I don't have an A, then put your bottom hand down on the A flat, or put it down on the B flat. It doesn't really matter, either one. It's not going to hurt any of the throat tones to put your bottom hand down early, and I would really recommend that that's what we do. I got my bottom hand down on the A flat, then I play the B flat. Now when I get ready to go to the C, this is already down, just that. Makes it so much simpler. So that's how I would work about getting the technique for the break. We don't have to do this on any of the other woodwind instruments. They all have a break. And none of them are problematic like this because all of them overblow all the overtones. They overblow an octave up. So we don't have this connecting notes that are causing all this trouble. Now there is a second break that I should mention. Because when I get to high C, now I've got a short tube again. To go higher, I got to start over. I'm going to start over from low A. That's what gives me C sharp. Now we only have one octave key for our thumb, so when I press that from a low A, it's going to give me an E. So to simulate another octave key to go to the C sharp, I'm going to take out my first finger. This is where all the high note fingerings come from. They're logical, very logical, because they are the fifth partial over above any of the fingers that we're playing. And oddly enough, these spell a major triad. So I got A, E, C sharp. Okay, they're out of order, but it's an A major triad. When I go up to B flat, F, D. That gives me my high D. When I go to B natural, F sharp, D sharp. And these just track right up. Now there are a couple of things, a little more to know about this. This is much simpler than the other break, for sure. But there are a couple of things to know about it. First of all, you know what? I might as well show you this. My thumb's getting a little tired. And I use a neck strap on the clarinet. And because I'm not using it right now, I'm starting to wipe out my thumb. This is a particular neck strap made by BG. It's elasticized. I like that because that way I got a little maneuverability, but it also gives me a lot of help to hang onto the clarinet. Now my clarinet has an eyelet where I can just put that through there. If you only have the thumb rest, it has a little leather thing that goes on it that lets you to attach it to the thumb rest, so you can use it either way. Now I've got this to help me support some of the weight. It still gives me total latitude. I'm not going to like be banging myself in the face, but. So now, here would be the first exercise then for learning to go over the break, the second break. Now, I need to mention two other techniques before I go further. We're now making a note hole double as an octave key hole. A note hole is much larger than an octave key hole. An octave key is like a pinhole. So I just pop it off. You can kind of hear a little bump, a little acoustic pop. Kind of an acoustic vacuum there or something. So to overcome that, we roll the index finger down. Over the break, we roll it up. In the second break, we roll it down. Why? Because as I roll it down, it only opens a sliver of that hole while I get the response of the note. Then we typically just keep rolling and take it right off. I don't have that big pop. It's much smoother. Better for the octave, functions better as an octave key that way. When I'm on the, I wouldn't do this on the C sharp, but on all the other notes, we're going to add the little finger, the E flat key, as a resonator. Too much on C sharp, but on D, it's actually good on the D. And then it's really essential on all the notes after that. D's kind of on the borderline. C sharp, no. D, yes, while you're learning, but there may be times where you decide to leave it off for tuning. but then to go for then on up, always down. Brings the note up to pitch a little bit better, makes a little bit better resonance in the note. So we call it a resonator key. On the saxophone and the altissimo, we use a side B flat as the resonator key for a number of those first notes off the horn, including the G sharp, the G sharp, A sharp, right in that area. You can check out the altissimo chapter for that information. So I'm going to do this exercise. Now those fingers, the higher we go in the overtones, they get flatter and flatter. And so let me show you what a couple of things that I did in there to help that. When I go to the high D sharp or E flat, the middle finger is really flat. So I'm fingering it in the low, on the low B, I'm actually fingering it like the chromatic fingering. It's like a chromatic F sharp fingering on the saxophone. Here I'm using it for low B, then with the octave key it's F sharp. And with the second octave key, or in other words, I'm rolling off the index finger, I'm going to get a high D sharp. Middle finger, better up to pitch. By the time I get up to high, well, I'm playing the D, overblowing to an A, and then an F sharp. Pretty flat. I put the resonator on it too, but it's still pretty flat. I'm going to put a second resonator, which is actually that chromatic F sharp key. I don't want to press rings though, so I pull back so I'm not depressing any rings. By using two resonators, I can get that up to pitch. There are a lot of other fingerings that can be used up here for these notes, but these are the ones that follow the Overtone series that I would put in the exercise right now for the initial experience with these fingerings. And they do work good for facility playing fast in the altissimo here. I would also do this exercise where I play octaves. Now I use the middle finger on purpose there to show you that is too flat, but I can't get to this because I'm fingering E flat, then I got to go like this. That isn't going to work well. So what I do there is I play it with the third finger instead of the middle finger. I'm playing the third finger, kind of like F sharp on the flute. That's pretty good in pitch. You'll see the difference here. Well, funny resonance difference too there. Anyway, you kind of get the idea that there's a few little techniques up here, but you can get those high notes going actually quite well, because these fingerings are these fingerings with the octave key and with the first finger off. So I can get quite a bit of facility up there by using those fingerings. I will mention one more thing about fingerings. The throat tones we mentioned. This is the worst offender. The B flat's just an awful sound. Now that's because we're using a hole here that's an octave key hole and making it double as a note hole, and the hole is way too small. We can actually fix that by using the third side key up here on the side, go up to the third one. Sounds a lot better because it's got an actual note hole instead of an octave key trying to be a hole. But we can't usually do that when we're going over the break because it's just too complicated for the technique. And so what we'll do, I'm putting down some extra fingers to give that note a little more resonance. What I'm doing in this case, I've got the B flat fingering, I'm adding 2, 3, and the C key. A lot more resonance. If I only put the two fingers, to help, but you can tell that with the C key it's much better. There's a certain note at that C key or something that just helps to bring it to life. If I'm playing the A, same thing. I'm going to put down 2, 3, 5, 6, or the second and third fingers of each hand, and then the F key. Look how much difference that C key is making. I can cover the G sharp this way. Or I can cover the G this way. I've written all those fingerings in the book if you want to check those out. I never complicate the technique at the beginning for the student by showing those fingerings to them. We always just do the open fingerings. And if they say, I've had a few astute students who say, man, that B5 just sounds awful. What do you do about that? I say, just be patient. We'll get to that later. And then I show them the covered fingers later on. Let me just say one more thing about vibrato. The clarinet player does not typically use vibrato. Our ears are acculturated to this pristine, pure sound that has no vibrato in it. Therefore, you don't have to worry about it. However, if you're doing a jazz thing, here's a Benny Goodman thing. Now I got to use some vibrato. When you do that style and you need vibrato, jaw vibrato, just like the saxophone. Then you just have to make it match the style. But if you practice jaw vibrato on the saxophone, just use the jaw vibrato on the clarinet. It's the best way to do it. Works well. So I think we've been going quite a while. We need to take a break here. So I'm going to sign off and we'll take a little break. And then we'll be back shortly and deal with other woodwind instruments that we might need to double.